Okay, great. Can everybody hear me? Does that sound okay? I don't know if I can see anybody.
Um,
Great,
yeah,
thank you. Excellent. Hi, my name is Steve Omohundro, and thank you so much for coming. Today, I'd like to talk about provably safe AI, and I'd like to go through the slides, and then we can discuss all the concepts afterward. So let me start here. The agenda for today is I'm going to argue that first, powerful but unsafe AI is already here. That current AI safety approaches are important and valuable, but they're insufficient to the problems that we face. That I'm going to argue that we need to use mathematical proof and the laws of physics to get guaranteed safety. And I'll talk about how you could do provable software, provable hardware, provable social mechanisms, and argue at the end that we must choose the path of human thriving. So to start, we actually already have very powerful, well, we have very powerful AI in the big labs, but we're starting to get very powerful AI in open source. And a few weeks ago, Meta started releasing their Llama 3 models. They have an 8 billion parameter, a 70 billion parameter, and a 400 billion parameter model. And they apparently spent $30 billion on the GPUs to do this. The largest model has a similar performance to the very best models from the labs, from GPT-4 Turbo, Claude 3 Opus, Gemini Ultra. And in the first week, 1.2 million downloads of the system came. Just to sort of get a sense of what the impact of this type of model, and they're not the only ones. There's the Falcon model out of Abu Dhabi. There's the Mistral models. Lots and lots of open source models are progressively getting better and better. They're not quite as good as the very best models in the commercial labs, but they're getting very close. The Llama 3 8 billion parameter model, somebody got running on a Raspberry Pi 5, which you can buy at Amazon right now for $93. And apparently, not the Raspberry 5, but Raspberry Pis in general have sold 61 million units. So if you just think about the impact, we're going to have pretty powerful AIs running on $100 computers, and there'll probably be hundreds of millions of them. So that's should be in the back of our minds as we're thinking about safety. The 70 billion parameter model, that one's getting, very serious. Not quite as good as the very best models, but up, the best models of a year ago or something. And this is a group that has shown how you can fine tune them for any task, any specialty on home video cards. So using two of the RTX 4090, you can have a machine which is about $7,000. And using, a fine tuning method called QDORA, you can get extremely high performance. The 400 billion parameter model is the one that is maybe even better than a lot of the top commercial models. And I was really nervous about that one going open source. Fortunately, the rumor from Jimmy Apples, if you've ever seen him, not necessarily a reliable source, his rumor is that they won't be open sourcing that, and that he says that Dustin Moskowitz, who does the Open Philanthropy Foundation, may have been responsible for that. So if so, thank you, Dustin, and it gives us a little bit more breathing room. So what is the lesson from all these powerful open source models? I would say basically that AI safety cannot rely only on alignment, because in addition to the wonderful aligned models from the labs, there will be hundreds of millions of models that are not necessarily aligned. And anyone in any country can cheaply fine tune an open source model to create a world-class specialized model for anything you can imagine: cyber attack, impersonation, manipulation, pathogen synthesis, and so on. So I believe that for true safety, we need to harden the infrastructure, the human infrastructure, so that even in the presence of all of these potentially unsafe models, we still thrive and everything goes well. Here's a paper showing that current LLMs are 81.7% more persuasive than humans. So that's a bit disturbing. That suggests people are going to start using LLMs for, trying to sell things, for trying to convince you, who you should vote for, and other persuasive things. More darkly, we may get AI manipulation, bribery, blackmail, extortion, intimidation, and so on. And so what's the lesson from that? Humans should not directly control risky actions, because then you put them in a position of being manipulated by AIs. And so we need to restructure the way we make decisions so that this type of manipulation can't directly cause problems. The NSA in the United States released a few years ago something called Ghidra, a very powerful reverse engineering tool that lets you, take code from any kind of a piece of software or hardware and figure out, what its structure is, and you can help use that to help protect it, or you can use that to attack it. But it's very, sophisticated tool that's hard to use. Well, somebody very helpfully created this G3PO, which is a large language model that knows all about Ghidra, and you can talk to it in English and it'll do it all for you. And so that type of thing suggests that many groups will soon have access to nation state level cyber attack capabilities. Similarly, this study showed that large language model agents can autonomously exploit one-day vulnerabilities. So if some system, a router or your operating system, has a flaw in it, and that flaw is published, like they call those 1 days, 0 days are the ones that haven't been published yet. The LLM could read that, generate the code, and attack it. And so that's a disturbing development. There's a huge amount of work going on right now in using LLMs both to prevent cyber attacks and also to do cyber attacks. This survey paper here at the bottom surveys 180 papers doing that. So I think the lesson we should get from this is that we should expect widely available open source AIs which can exploit the vulnerabilities of every common system. This is one of many, many papers which are taking frontier, leading edge large language models and trying to turn them into agents. So this one is an agent for automating the design of CRISPR gene editing experiments. And they took several copies of large language models and they hook them up in a certain way. And then it does reasoning, it has goals, it can operate all the big labs are working on this. And as you get a system which does something, if a new large language model comes out, you can just drop them in. And so as language models improve, agents should improve very rapidly. And so the lesson I think we should take from this is that powerful agent models are likely to take off very rapidly in the next year or two. So what are our timelines? How long, what's going to happen? Where's it going to go? Open Philanthropy has been doing a lot of study of trying to really rigorously estimate timelines and takeoff times. And they built this wonderful tool at takeoffspeeds.com, which lets you put in various assumptions about, what the different costs and so on are. And they use their model, which is based on all kinds of historical data, and they'll show you what the outcome of that is. Daniel Kokatahalo, I don't think I said his name right, used to be at OpenAI. He's one of the recent AI safety people that resigned. And he's kind of famous because he resigned in a way where he didn't sign their non-disclosure thing. So very concerned about AI safety. And he gave a talk a few months ago where he used this model. He put in everything he knows as a safety person at OpenAI, and this is what he came up with. And it's a little disturbing for him. This line is called the wake-up call line, where there's enough happening that people start getting concerned, and that's 2025 in his model. This line is when 20% of the world's economic activity can be automated by AI systems, and for his model, that's in 2026. And then this line is when 100% of the world's work can be done by these models, and for him that's around 2027. So who knows if he's exactly right, but it's reasonable assumptions, and we're talking 2 or 3 years before very significant influence on the world. So what do we do about this? Well, as this wonderful conference is, I've got fantastic, interesting talks and interesting ideas. A really nice summary, I think, of the current thinking is Dan Hendricks's book, Introduction to AI Safety, Ethics, and Society, totally free at this URL. And the two biggest sources of problems are malicious humans using AI to do malicious things, and then AI, which itself is malicious, the goal-driven agents. And I think we need to worry about both of them. My sense is that malicious humans are the most immediate threat because, they're already using them for, trying to get more clicks on Twitter and trying to extort people and, all kinds of bad behaviors. And they list the top existential threats as things like bioterrorism, nuclear weapons, lethal autonomous weapons, and cyber attacks. So very good, very nice. what are the basic methods of preventing that? And I would say the top 5 methods that I've been looking at least are alignment, trying to make sure these models have values which are aligned with humans. Red teaming, trying to attack the models to force them into doing bad things and seeing how easily they can do that. Restricting them to non-agentic AI tools. Limiting system power. You know, the United States has put limits on if you train a model on more than a certain amount of compute flops, you've got to notify the government. Pausing or halting AI progress. There's, you know, the Pause AI group. There are various letters that argue for that. I think all of these efforts are fantastic, really important, very good. Unfortunately, I don't think any of these will solve the problem. Many because of these open source models. So alignment, you know, you align a corporate model, great. What about all the open source models that various groups are playing with? Red teaming. Red teaming can show the presence of problems. It can never show the absence of problems. Restricting to non-agentic AI tools. Well, I think we've got 100 groups who are already not doing that. Limiting system power. That could be, that's a potentially good thing, except many of these models run on, you know, cheap hardware, the Raspberry Pi. And so there's some limits in that. Pausing and halting AI progress. I think that's great. The trouble is, if you're going to pause it, you need to do something during that pause to make the world, make it a better situation when you finish pausing. And so what is that thing? So what I'm going to talk about, hopefully, are what we can do in that kind of a pause. I would argue that we really need to take a security mindset. And this book by Nancy Levinson, Engineering a Safer World, is a very nice study of that in everyday things. You know, how to make sure airplanes don't fall out of the sky. Unfortunately, we're seeing that more and more in the news. Basically, you need to model the system, model the harms that you're trying to avoid, model what your adversary's capabilities are, and then create designs that have safety guarantees against that adversary. So a group of us, just a week or two ago, wrote this paper, Towards Guaranteed Safe AI, a framework for ensuring robust and reliable AI systems, which lays that out and makes those pieces more formal, and then takes a bunch of other proposals and shows where they lie on the spectrum of how strong their assumptions are and their guarantees are. And I think it's great. I think it starts putting everybody under the same tent. But against the strongest AI adversaries, if we're really dealing with super intelligent entities, unfortunately, I think most of those methods won't really provide guarantees in that case. That there are only 2 things that provide absolute constraints on super intelligent entities, and that's mathematical proof and the laws of physics. Well, why is this? Well, it's because even the most powerful AI can't prove a false statement. Even the most powerful AI can't create matter out of nothing. It can't go faster than the speed of light. It can't make entropy decrease. So the basic structure of the universe provides tight constraints. And if we can use those constraints for human safety, that would be a great thing. And so that's the proposal that Max Tegmark and I did in this paper from a few months ago, Provably Safe Systems, the only path to controllable AGI. And I'll sketch some of the ideas there. I think this is just the bare beginning. There are many opportunities for expanding this. And so this is really more a call to please start, thinking in this direction and inventing new ways of doing things safely. So let me start with provable software. So all of this is based on mathematical proof. So let me just give what do we need for mathematical proof? We have these universal logical languages which allow you to express any precise statement. So, these logics came from natural language, from human language, where human language has ways of describing things, but human language is very fuzzy and it has probabilistic things. And so the logicians have sort of extracted the concepts from natural language and put them in a form where you can say things which are absolutely precise. And it turns out they've now gotten to the point where all of mathematics, physics, computer science, engineering, economics can all be expressed in these languages. And that any statement which is true in all models in one of these formal languages has a proof. And proofs are these sort of sequences of statements that can be checked. And there are small, fast proof checkers which can check these proofs with absolute reliability. And so that combination of characteristics, I think, is very, very powerful for AI safety. So here is an example of the simplest way that you might use this kind of thing. Let's say you have an untrusted AI. Somebody trained it, you don't know who. Let's say it's running on hardware in some place, in the middle of the desert somewhere. You don't trust them. You don't know what its motivations are. You don't know if it might have some, hidden agenda, all of that. Can you still use that AI to do work that's of value to you in a way that you can trust it? So here is a mechanism for doing that. First of all, the human never talks directly with the untrusted AI because then the AI could manipulate you. It could kind of trick you and do all kinds of terrible things. Instead, the human poses their problem or their software requirement if they need software, or systems requirement if they're trying to build a hardware or a social system. They express it in one of these precise languages. The precise statement is then given to the untrusted AI, and it's allowed to solve it using any technique it wants. It can use search, it can use neural nets, it can use reinforcement, anything you like. And it can run on untrusted hardware. It can actually send jobs off to other untrusted AIs. So terrible, horrible from a alignment perspective. But nonetheless, let's say it succeeds. If it succeeds, it gives you the solution. But in addition to the solution, it also gives you a proof that it's a solution. You, as a human, receive the solution and the proof. You can now run your proof checker, which is a teeny, reliable piece of code. There are, 300-line Python programs that check one of these systems called MetaMath. If it checks the solution, then it doesn't matter what the source of it was. You have an absolute guarantee that it meets your requirements. And so that's an example of how to move from untrusted, potentially dangerous AIs and yet use that to build trusted infrastructure. So there are 5 important logical systems that are underlying a lot of the theorem provers today. And I'll just briefly say what they are. There's tons and tons of literature on them. The simplest one is called propositional logic, was invented in 1847. This is basically given a Boolean circuit. Is there an input that produces true as the output? And there are very powerful, it's called satisfiability. There are SAT solvers. Microsoft has one called Z3 that's quite good. In 1885, that was extended by including functions and variables and quantifiers. And that's first order logic. And first order logic can really express anything that can be proven. And there are some pretty good first order logic provers, one called vampire prover. In 1922, mathematicians built a first order theory which could express all of mathematics and therefore all of engineering and physics and so on. And that's now called Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory. And there is a system called MetaMath, which pretty directly implements that. In 1940, type theory was sort of a parallel set of developments to set theory, and it's closer to computation and programming. And so on the software side, computer scientists often like type theory. And so in 1940, Church invented something that's now called simple type theory, and Isabelle is a theorem prover that's based on that. And then in the 1980s, people wanted a richer expressive capability. They developed dependent type theory. And the 2 hottest systems, I would say, today are Coq and Lean. Coq is more for the computer science. Lean is more for the mathematicians. And they're both based on this dependent type theory. All of these last 3 are basically equally expressive, and you can convert any statement in any one of them and any proof in any one of them to the others. And so it's more a matter of taste, which one you want to use. AI theorem provers are moving ahead very rapidly. And the reason is I think it's quite theorem provers are very analogous to game AIs. So we've had huge development in playing chess, playing Go, playing Atari. And in the case of game AIs, we know what the legal moves are, and we know when you've won. Same with a theorem prover. We know what steps you can take in a theorem, in a proof that are valid, and you know when you finished proving it. In the 1990s, IBM had Deep Blue for playing chess that basically just used search. It just searched. They built special purpose hardware, and they were able to beat the human world champion with that. Later, DeepMind developed AlphaGo, where they trained a neural net on human games of Go, and then they combined that with Monte Carlo tree search, and the combination was able to beat the world's best Go player. Then they said, well, let's not train it on human games, and they created AlphaZero, and it just played itself, and it learned from its own self-play and was able to beat AlphaGo. They also said, well, let's train it on chess. And Demis Hassabis here is famous for having said that AlphaZero, starting from scratch, became the greatest chess-playing entity that's ever existed in 9 hours. So I think that's an indicator of how rapidly things can move when they're able to generate their own training data. Stockfish used to be a search-based chess player. I think it's open source, but they incorporated all the ideas of AlphaZero, and I believe Stockfish is now the world's best chess player. And then somebody just recently trained an LLM on Stockfish, and they created a large language model for playing chess that uses no search. So I think that progression is something that's very interesting to keep in mind. And it looks to me like the theorem provers are undergoing that. The classical theorem provers like Vampire and Z3, they're all based just on search with maybe a little bit of heuristics in there. In 2020, OpenAI published about GPT-F, F for formal, in which they trained a large language model on 36,000 metamath theorems, and they were able to prove 56% of the held out theorems. In 2022, Meta did Hypertree proof search, which was an AlphaZero style Monte Carlo tree search transformer, and they trained on all of archive math papers, and they were able to prove 82% of metamath theorems. In the time since then, there have been a whole bunch of open source provers, Lean Dojo, Lemma, Reprover, CokeGym, and that area is really hot. A new paper just came out yesterday or day before yesterday, which looks quite interesting. For security, we need to use cryptography, and the world uses a lot of cryptography. The net is based on cryptography. Public key cryptography lets you exchange information. Unfortunately, it is vulnerable to quantum computing, and so the world is trying to sort of upgrade the public key infrastructure for post-quantum cryptography, but it's not looking so good. Here's an estimate of when quantum computing will be a problem there. There's there's cryptography based on one-way functions, symmetric cryptography, AES, SHA-2, and so on, and that is more resistant against quantum computing, but it's still not proven correct. And then there is information theoretic cryptography, which is not very widely used right now because it's slightly more inconvenient, but it's provably safe. And so I suspect we should at least make the foundation of the systems we're building based on information theoretic cryptography. So what is all this proof, AI proof? What value does it have? There's a big area in computer science called formal methods, where they try and check programs and make sure that they're correct. They check the programs in advance. What we're proposing here is that you have AI systems which are generating programs as a part of the natural operation of systems. Correctness is nice. Yeah, the program has no flaws, but humans can do that. You think it through well enough and you test it a bunch, you can kind of get to a pretty high level of correctness. If you're in a security situation, then even if you have, say, 0.01% of the inputs are flawed, an attacker can find those and exploit those. Chip design, it's even more critical, because if you have a flaw in a chip, you got to, redo it and change it. Intel had that problem a few years ago, and they now use lots of formal methods. The other benefit is that it's not just correctness and security, but it gives you a certificate, which is a social thing that says this is correct, and that can be used to combine multiple independent systems. You can trust work done by untrusted parties, and so it's very powerful. I believe we need to extend this to hardware. And so let me just give some examples with a few lessons about today's hardware. Somebody has an AI system that from the sound of you typing on your keyboard, it can extract your password. So that says to me the lesson is today's password-based cryptography is very vulnerable. This is somebody who took a design for a chip, and by adding one transistor deeply in the middle of it, they basically make it so that an obscure instruction sequence adds a little bit of charge to a capacitor. And if you do that instruction sequence enough times, it charges the capacitor up and it opens up a back door to the chip. And so how do you find that? If some employee, is working on your chip. So the lesson for me is that both fabs and manufacturing must be secured. The supply chains that we have today, all kinds of stories about adversaries intercepting hardware en route and making changes to it. So the lesson is today's supply chains are insecure. Here's an example of the guy who took a $2 microcontroller chip, little teeny thing, and stuck it into a Cisco firewall using, I think they say, $200 of tools. That's the little addition, and that opens up a back door for this firewall that probably nobody's going to notice in today's world. Unfortunately, that's been happening in military hardware. Here's a story about counterfeit Cisco gear ending up in hardware that's in combat operations. So the lesson is today's military hardware is insecure. Rowhammer is an example, very important but kind of shocking thing that all of our DRAM memory chips today, if you access them in a certain way, it can cause bits to flip, and people are using that to violate security. I believe the only way to deal with this is using mathematical proof. Our physical locks are really terrible. There's a great YouTube channel called The Lockpicking Lawyer, where every episode is he gets, locks people send him or all kinds of locks, and he breaks them. He opens them in about, a few seconds typically. Every front door lock of almost every home is subject to something called a bump key. Many safes are vulnerable. Most cars are vulnerable. So our physical security infrastructure is pretty much a disaster right now. We're getting lots of, this seems to be the year of the humanoid robot. There are about 20 humanoid robot companies. We got all kinds of drones. We have drone boats, submarine drones, miniature drones, big drones, autonomous land vehicles. And that's only going forward more and more quickly. And people are figuring out how to use LLMs to operate them. So how do we use mathematical proof for hardware security? First of all, we need formal physical world models. We need a formal model of the powers of an adversary. We need a formal safety specification, and then we generate a formal system design that is provably safe in that world model against that class of adversaries. And so typically in different engineering disciplines, they use models, they use fairly formal models today, which are built in kind of a stack. So like for chip design, you have the design of the chip at the circuit level, this gate, you have a gate here and it goes there. Then you have the physical design, which is how is that circuit laid out on the chip physically. And then below that, you have the physical properties, like what are the electromagnetic fields? So like Rowhammer is a problem that the electromagnetic fields on the chip are causing bit flips that shouldn't be there. And so you need a model which can model that. And down at the very bottom of all these stacks is the basic fundamental laws of physics. And fortunately, we're very lucky to have a complete model of the laws of physics called the Standard Model of Particle Physics plus General Relativity. Here's the equation with everything in it. That is believed to be completely valid for energies less than about 10 to the 11th electron volts and away from black holes, neutron stars, and the early universe where quantum gravity and so on might be important. Sean Carroll, this is from Sean Carroll's paper, The Quantum Field Theory in Which the Everyday World Subvenes. He's got lots and lots of books and papers, very interesting if you're interested in this. And he argues that the world we live in, say around the solar system, this core theory completely describes everything. Of course, there may be other particles and there may be an underlying reality which is different, but our everyday experience of life only depends on this core theory. And so for safety, that's what we can rest on. And I believe we need to use these kinds of models, these kinds of formal models, to develop trusted components which we can compose into more powerful systems. And so the core components in my thinking are trusted sensing, trusted computation, trusted memory, trusted communication, trusted randomness, trusted raw materials, trusted actuators, and trusted deletion and destruction. And by combining these in various ways, you can get trusted tamper sensing, trusted provenance of the history of some physical object, trusted 3D printers where you can actually make things that you're guaranteed about their structure, trusted manufacturing, trusted supply chains, trusted networking, trusted energy encryption, hiding energy in a way that an adversary can't extract it, trusted robots. Let me just go through a few of these quickly. How do we get a physical material in a known state? We've seen you can insert back doors into things. You can hide them in chips. You can put them all over the place. What if your raw materials have little nanobots hidden inside them or something like that? Well, fortunately, from the laws of physics, turns out we know what the strongest chemical bond is, something called protonated hydrogen dinitrogen. I don't know what that is. Steel melts at 1500 degrees. Tungsten melts at 3000 degrees. All chemical structure is destroyed by 10,000 degrees. So if you really, really, really want to be sure, just melt whatever it is at a high temperature, and now you've got something in a known state, and you can build up from that. Similarly, for fluids and gases, you can distill them in different ways. To have a device where you're sure no one has attacked it, Today's computers are quite vulnerable, and somebody could sneak in and read your hard drive or whatever. Um, you need something. You need anti-tamper systems, and here's an example of one which I think is quite nice. You encase whatever the thing you're trying to protect in a container, and you have a radio transmitter and a radio receiver inside that container, and it learns the signature, whatever's in that container. And if that signature changes, that means something has happened. There's some kind of a tampering going on. And in their experiments, they can detect a 16 millimeter insertion of a needle with a diameter of 0.1 millimeters. So that's an example of, with a very simple first order thing, you can detect very subtle attempts at attacks. Apple has been building this Apple Secure Enclave into all of their products, Macs, MacBooks, iPads, iPhone, Apple Watch, Apple TV, HomePad, that has all the elements you really need for good cryptography. It has a truly random, physical random number generator on it. It has a unique ID, which is not, you can't read off the chip for identity. It has hardware encryption, has encrypted memory, and it has some level of tamper protection. Zeroization, I think, is a critical technique. It's actually back from the 1960s, which is the idea that if you detect tampering, you delete your cryptographic keys. And so that means if you've got a system with sensitive, important information in it, and an attacker tries to attack it, you probably can't prevent them from blowing it up or cutting it open. But if you detect any tampering, you can delete the cryptographic keys. And so all the information in it is useless, and the adversary can't take over the system. And so that's a very important primitive property of this. And you can do similar things for things which take physical actions. Like if you have a robot, you could have fuses in its actuators that get blown in the case of a tamper detection. Or in a biological laboratory, for example, you could have acid that gets mixed into the biological samples under detecting of tampering. So by composing these pieces, you can build up much more interesting and complex pieces of hardware. If you combine tamper sensing with zeroization, you get something we call a provable contract. This is a little module, a little device that can do secure computation, which is guaranteed to be the computation you think it is, can do provably correct cryptography and communicate with other provable contracts. And if anybody tries to attack it or open it, it deletes the keys. And so it's totally secure in that sense. Out of those, you can build provably secure networks by combining provable contracts with information theoretic cryptography. You can do provable provenance. You can make provable robots that only do exactly what you think they're going to do, that nobody can get in there and take it over. You can have provable materials, you can do provable manufacturing, and you can build provable supply chains. And so using these kinds of ideas, you can build up an infrastructure, human infrastructure, which is not vulnerable to attack by even the most powerful AGIs. So once you have that hardware, you can use it to do new kinds of social mechanisms as well. And we're just barely beginning to think about this area. I think there's huge opportunity. So here are just a few examples of things we do today and what the new provable version of it might look like. So today we have voting, but voting is insecure. People are always saying, people are cheating on the ballots and they're counting them wrong and so on. Using those provable contracts, we can have proven aggregation of individual semantic preferences in a sort of guaranteed way. Today we have surveillance, surveillance cameras, and either you have privacy or all your information is available to everyone. In this world of provable hardware, you can create controlled sensing, say cameras, which provably do not reveal any information about what they're looking at unless, say, they see a gun and then they reveal it. That would be an example you could do. Today, many people are calling for human in the loop, particularly around autonomous weapons and so on. The trouble is, as we talked about, humans are vulnerable to manipulation, threats, and bribery and so on. So I don't think we want humans in the loop. I'd rather shift it to the human creates the loop. So humans decide what the rules are for operating something, but you don't want a human in the middle of it while things are happening, I believe. Today we have humans running factories, but then the humans are manipulable. Instead, we need provable robots, maybe combined with human teleoperation. Then we can have factory spaces where we have absolute guarantees that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Today we have biometric identity. We can extend that to provable contract identity with provenance. Today we have all kinds of social dilemmas and Moloch, and we've got the prisoner's dilemma. Using these provable contracts, you can put joint provable constraints over multiple agents. And so you can guarantee that agents work together in the way that they would like to. And so I think you can really transform the nature of economic interaction using some of these technologies. Today we have laws, but they're only, partially enforced. Here we can have meta contracts, which are provably guaranteed to govern contracts underneath them. Today, economics goes for profit maximization, often at the expense of individuals. We can design a new sort of social benefit maximizing system that includes the externalities of actions. Today, we have arms races, and with this type of technology, we could have guaranteed joint agreements. So I think the potential is there for huge benefits, but it certainly needs lots of fleshing out. So what happens next? If we keep on with today's sloppy technology and the AIs get better and different groups, have open source versions, I think we're going to see increasing AI-powered cyber attacks. We're going to see disruption of critical infrastructure. We're going to have social media is going to become even more dehumanizing. We're going to have AI-powered crime, AI-powered politics, which ignores the citizens, environmental damage, and a race to the bottom. If we start building this provable technology and really develop the human infrastructure in this way, we can eliminate all cyber attacks. We can build reliable infrastructure. We can create media which enhances our humanity. We can create peace and prosperity. We can have empowered citizens. We can rebuild the environment, and we can go for long-term human flourishing. So I think the choice is clear. We should be, we are at a fork in the road. One path, I think, does not lead to a good outcome. The other path, I think, potentially is a kind of utopia. So I would say, let's choose the path of human thriving. So thank you.